Hello friends and enemies, welcome back to Happy For Now. I hope you're excited. We're gonna just quickly go through all of my stats and some of the charts and graphs from 2021's reading about called to 2020. Boy howdy, did it feel like 2020 2.0. I had a really stellar reading year in 2021. As many of you know, I've read the most books I've ever read in a year, which is a total of 415 books. Which is wild, absolutely wild. And that totaled for 95,521 pages. So I was just 5,000 pages shy of my like semi-page number goal. Like I would love to hit 100,000 pages in a year. I don't know if I ever will, because I do read a lot of shorter items, but I'm still really happy with where I hit. I listened to approximately 335 hours of audiobooks. And I averaged 34 books a month. So I did really, really good. I'm very happy with my reading this year. I'm happy with the quantity I read and what I got through, but I did notice that it was a year that though I read a whole bunch, not a lot was favorites and not a lot was things that I like stood out. Like I really, really struggled to put together my favorites list, which you'll see in like a week from this video. But, you know, I did read a lot. So I just figured we would go through some of my charts and all those items and maybe some of my year in review from Goodreads and talk about it. First up, let's talk about my genre chart. And no big surprise, romance was a huge portion of my reading in 2021. So a large portion was romance contemporary, but if you look at all the romances as a whole, you'll notice that that's almost about 40% of the pie chart. And then manga and shoujo manga in particular was also another large portion, which again, not a big surprise. I feel like I lean really heavily into shoujo genre manga and josei. Personally, like those are my sweet spots. I know like some series I read are considered seinen, but I feel like they border on josei. It's just marketing. I have my format chart, which I think is really interesting, and I'm surprised by this breakdown this year. I realized that adding manga in upped my physical format a lot in a way that I've never had before, because I have been a digital reader for a very long time now. I talked about that in another video. I can link it for y'all down below. But yeah, like I've always been a heavy digital reader, so it's interesting to see physical format show up in such a heavy way on my format breakdown. So I read 25% manga physically, 25% ebook basically, and then 28-ish% audiobooks, which isn't a big surprise. The mixed format are books that I alternated between an ebook and an audiobook on. And yeah, I mean, that's one that I don't use a ton of. I want to be better about how I document that one next year, because sometimes I don't always document that I did that. And it just ends up defaulting to one of the two formats, whichever one I decide to pick in the moment. So that's always a little bit of a dicey statistic for me. Then we have my reading versus listening page, and I'm not surprised by this. 42% were pages I listened to, and 58% was pages I read. And this is only this high because of manga. Guaranteed. I really do listen to audiobooks a lot, and I lean on audiobooks a lot in my day-to-day life and getting things done. So I know that this is only broken down this way instead of more of a 50-50 split or even a 60% audio because of the manga I've been reading this year. So I thought the publisher breakdown was actually pretty interesting, because I always lean pretty heavily independently published books. With my romance reading, I feel like I'm not as heavy as some of my friends, but I do feel like I read a lot of indie books. So the 28% for self-published was not a surprise, but I was surprised to see that Kodansha Comics was at almost 13% on this chart, because I was looking through like my manga before I moved and they got packed up, and I realized like I read a lot of Kodansha and I didn't realize it. Like I thought I read more from other publishers than I actually do of manga. And Viz of course was 20% because like they're one of the biggest publishers, but I still was just surprised to see how much Kodansha I read as that being the second one. I just didn't feel like it was. I also was a little bit surprised that Avon wasn't higher, because I do feel like for traditionally published romance, Avon tends to be my go-to, but I read a lot of Berkeley this year, and that's a little bit surprising because again, I thought that's who I leaned towards, and I do definitely usually lean towards them, but Berkeley for some reason this year just had a little bit of a heyday in my reading. I think it might be because of some of the mystery thrillers they published this year. All right, let's talk about rating. So as I said, I felt like I read a lot this year, but I read a lot that wasn't stellar. And I actually really struggled to put together my best of list this year. And I feel like this chart shows it. So I use the 6-star rating system, which I stole from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. 6 stars are all-time favorites. And I use this to try and pull out books at the end of the year that I really, really loved. And if you look at this breakdown, I had so many 4-star reads this year and not a lot of 6 stars and not a lot of 5s. It's basically a bell curve for me because I do tend to DNF a book that is going to be a 1-star or a 2-star for me. I'm not huge on hate reading a book. It just depends. Occasionally it happens. And I just have this graph like really enforced for me what this year was like reading wise. It was like a lot of 4-star books that I really, really liked but had some issues with, and not a lot of lower rated books or higher rated books. And then we have my book status where I documented where I got it. So this I thought was also very interesting because I read 40% of books that I'd bought or already purchased. So I feel like usually my library percentage is higher than it was this year, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And then let's see. I mean, the library is my second biggest one, which again, I've said it before, I'm a huge library reader. I love my library. It is one of the best resources out there. And then Kindle Unlimited is third, which again makes sense. I do read a lot of KU books, but I would definitely like to see the other groups of this, like my Hoopla and things like that, get a little bit higher in 2022 because I want to make sure I'm using services I have access to. I did not make a chart, and it is not 100% accurate because I've not had time to go through and double check any of my information that I put in, but I did read about 40% of underrepresented authors this year, which I'm happy with, but I do plan to see an uptick in that number next year. And yeah, that was my reading though. Like, those are my stats. I'm pretty happy with it this year. I would like to see, like I said, a higher number for underrepresented, which for me encompasses everything that is not the norm that we see in society. So it's not cis, it's not white. Talking LGBTQIAP+, we're talking about things like non-Christian religions being represented and things like that. Like, it can be a whole variety of items that make it underrepresented, but again, it's not your like straightforward what you usually see. But yeah, that was my reading stats this year. This all came from my spreadsheet, which I used from Brock over at Let's Read, and I will have a video up later this month showing how I set up the spreadsheet for 2022. So if you want that, be sure to be on the lookout for it. Let me know how your stats were this year. Did anything surprise you? I feel like mine are pretty steady with where I usually am. And I definitely just want to see where I land next year once, you know, I really start putting some information into my spreadsheet. If you made it this far, you can also leave me a nerd emoji because I feel like such a nerd going through my stats for the year, but here we are. And then I will include a scroll through of my Goodreads wrap up year in books at the end of this as well, like right after this. So if you're interested, you can see that, and I'll have a link to it down below. And I will see y'all in my next video in just a few days. Bye.
Already packing, come with me. I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be. Life with no distractions. We'll get away.